Welcome, everyone, to today's LinkedIn Live. I'm Bruce Heckfeldt. I'm your host. I'm going to introduce our guests in a second, but I want to get into our topic and do a couple instructions. So today's topic is the walkaway advantage, negotiating smarter, exiting richer, winning deals. I'm excited for this. I think this is one of the things that many founders get wrong when they approach a transaction, approach it exiting. And so I'm excited to have this conversation. A couple of notes. We're going to be live here on both LinkedIn and YouTube. If you're on LinkedIn and you want to leave a question or a comment, go ahead and leave it on the LinkedIn page. I'll see those and we will weave them into the conversation as we get them. I'm not going to be watching the YouTube comments, so if you want to leave a comment live here, go jump on the LinkedIn and do it there. However, if you're watching the replay on either platform, go ahead and leave comments and questions there. We will watch those in the coming days and weeks and reply to those. So even if you're on the replay, go ahead and leave questions and we'll respond to those. So let's get our introductions here. First up, I've got Gabriella Smith. She helps founders become multimillionaires by helping them through the M&A process, specifically through her M&A law firm, G&S Law. Gabriella is passionate about helping founders get safely through the legal traps that every company faces in this process. Generally focuses on sell side, helping founders maximize the value of their companies while avoiding the missteps and costly mistakes that people make. And she's known for pushing clients to think differently, including when it's time to walk away. Topic of today. So with all that, Gabriella, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Bruce.
Great to have you on here. Next up, I've got Neil Conlon. He is a strategic advisor and coach. He works closely with founders to help them understand business value, understand their positioning, and how to prepare for successful exits, both mentally, strategically, and tactically. He's been on all sides of deals, bringing sharp focus and perspective to how founders often underestimate what they don't know and how that impacts the deal outcomes and how they can increase value of their business and the success of their transactions. So with that, Neil, welcome to the program.
Let's go. Good to be here.
Yeah, let's do it. So let's kick into this. I'm curious, just kind of in terms of why founders make these mistakes. Like, what's one thing that you see founders kind of, from a mindset point of view, kind of get wrong when it comes to transactions and exits? Gabriella, when we talk, hear you first on this one.
Yeah.
Like, what do you notice?
I mean, there are so many things, but I think a common thread. Even the most successful founders that I've met from a revenue perspective, a put together perspective, they think very small. One of the things is that you have a buyer luring, this carrot in front of their face and saying, here's all this amount of money, which seems like a lot, but and it's very tempting to be like, oh, I want to take it, I want to grab it, I want to do this right now and get this kind of like the car fever.
Yeah.
And then you start shrinking yourself once you've seen the numbers and when you have an LI, And so thinking small in the process of a sale, both before you're ready to sell and when you're in the process of selling, is very dangerous.
Yeah. Neil, what do you notice? Like, what's the thing that you often see with these founders?
I think there's two sides to it. There is the, classically trained MBA executive who learns all the business principles and has all the foundations and all the business modeling stuff. And they go out into the world and they start a business, but then they're lacking the real life experience about how things work.
Yeah.
And so they stumble and fall in their own way. And then you have the passionate entrepreneur type who has all the fire and has the life experience and lacks the basic business principles. And the crazy thing is that both of those people can build successful businesses. But when it comes time to value the business or to express to somebody and get someone else to value that business at the same level you do, they're both missing core functionality pieces of the business that suddenly they're this business is not worth what you think it is, right? Which is a big piece of the work I'm doing, to be I think your business is actually worth more than you think it is. But there's basics that have to be sussed out. And that's where people just it just falls apart for people.
Yeah. I do find, I think one of the fundamental challenges, I think, for most founders is this is going to be, maybe you're going to do this once, twice, three times if you run a couple of businesses, right? And so these are very few and far between for most founders, whereas many buyers, right, this is a Tuesday, right? Like they're doing this on a regular basis. And so the kind of informational asymmetry, the kind of the situational asymmetry that comes in, just creates a lot of opportunities for missteps from a founder point of view. I like this idea of, particularly around valuation, right? Like I found it ends up being one of the two camps, and Neil, you've got to set it up. It's either, I think my company is worth way more than the market is actually willing to pay for it, or the other camp, which is they underestimate the kind of the value of what they've created because they really don't understand the kind of the market value. How do you help founders kind of understand kind of that market value? Like where is a market for the business currently? How to understand kind of the spread of that, the factors that are going to drive you kind of higher or lower on that scale. Like how do you kind of educate or help founders understand kind of valuation? Gabriele, I'm curious to kind of get your take on this.
Yeah, first of all, I mean, I was triggered when you said, which is so true, right? When you said buyers are in the business of buying, that's what they do every single day. But sellers are not. Sellers are in the business of scaling businesses and growing the business and taking care of customers. So the asymmetry of power and knowledge is real and it is true.
Yeah.
Right. And so that is triggering to me because I pound that into their heads. So for me, that translates into what are you doing now, 5 years before, to get ready for that moment? From every perspective, accounting, legal, every perspective, mental, economical, tax, everything, to get to the table at the same level that your buyer is, right? Or higher. And we can take that, that's another rabbit hole. But to your specific question, I think in terms of valuation, a company is worth what a buyer and a seller agree it is worth. And that is what I think where the preparation goes. So if the company is worth what the buyer tells you they think it's worth, then you're playing their game. Right. But if you've done your homework in every aspect that I just mentioned, then the company is worth what you and the buyer agree is worth. And so that takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of knowledge, preparation, and balls to be able to walk away if you have to walk away because you just don't think that it's worth what the buyer is saying. And it's that. So. Yeah.
Neil, how do you kind of advise, coach, explain to founders this whole kind of valuation complexity?
I think there's a delta there because I think a lot of people, myself included, I know I've done this in the past, it's like we start businesses out of necessity, out of trauma, out of some entrepreneurial want, right? And many business owners, even when you get successful at it, didn't have the exit strategy. Like they didn't go in with the exit strategy. I think mapping out the exit strategy, like knowing like, hey, we're going to build this thing and our goal would be to exit in this timeline at this stage, because then you can build that kind of value proposition over time. And anytime you get distracted, you're just like, does this align with kind of what the exit strategy is? Because otherwise you end up kind of like blocking and tackling, it's like, it's one thing to say like, hey, we're going to climb this mountain, right? And that's the goal. But it's another thing to be like, we're going to climb this mountain and we're not going to check the weather conditions before we go. And then as the economic and marketplace environment is shifting, then you're going to have trials and tribulations about the value of what's going to accomplish when you get up there. And I think even like in this marketplace, like with socio-economic things happening, geopolitical things happening, and this now AI thing happening at the same time, it's basically like the value of every business is definitely under scrutiny right now. And I think also a lot of the smaller businesses, the like 2, 5, 10, 20, maybe even as far up into $30 million businesses, like I'm always going to go back to these fundamentals that they, if you looked at like Kraft for a company, like Kraft, for example, which is like a multi-billion-dollar organization, some people think that's a food business. And it's not. It's a manufacturing business. And so like all of their metrics and everything that they do is all bound into like, walking, talking, structuring the business like a manufacturing, even though the thing they put out into the world is food or supposed food. And so like, but if you look through it, if you're looking at the value of that business as a food company, nothing they do makes any sense. And so it's like you don't realize until you get these big companies, like what's the real value proposition of what you're doing. It's probably not your end result. It is, you know, are you leading with a brand, right? Harley Davidson is a brand company. Their value proposition is a brand company. A lot of these companies now, Uber is not a vehicle company. It's a tech company.
Yeah.
You know, even Carvana, which is a big, huge company, is going through this big, huge evolution where they used to be the largest secondary car reseller in the world. And now they're actually becoming one of the largest tech companies in the world.
Yeah.
Because it's more valuable in this marketplace for them to be a tech company than it is to sell cars, which is them pivoting because of the marketplace shifting around them and doing that. I think that's the biggest thing, is like it's that delta between like what's our exit strategy, but then also like what's going on in the marketplace right now. And that marketplace is becoming very volatile.
Well, and you're bringing up a good point, which is that, you know, the valuation is very much a question is what's the frame that the buyer is evaluating this business on, not necessarily business fundamentals. I mean, yes, we want to look at the business fundamentals and understanding like what's the EBITDA and like how you're generating, you know, profit and all those kind of things. But from a buyer point of view, it's really this question of how are they evaluating the business? And, you know, evaluating a services company is very different than evaluating a tech company. And you can take the exact same company and spin a different story depending on how you're presenting it, and understanding, you know, what is the buyer looking for, or what is the buyer going to value, and how do we tell the story that fits that frame, I think is one of the fundamental aspects of exit planning and exit strategies. And that's something I think a lot of founders don't really understand, and certainly don't do, because they're so engrossed in their business and kind of just figuring out how do we drive business performance. They're not thinking about the business framing from the buyer's point of view. How, I guess, Gabriella, how have you seen, or what are the factors that go into kind of really shifting the founder from being the kind of thinking about their business as the business, and more of thinking about a set of kind of assets and capabilities that could be valuable to a potential buyer, and how do we frame that? What's that process like?
Yeah, but I would actually, Bruce, I would actually add the mirror of that, which is, who do I want to sell the company to? Right? Because so the, you know, in the small business realm, and we work with, you know, small businesses, right? And so your family, your husband or wife, or your couple with business, whatever, and you're like, oh my God, Google is interested in my company. Big name, Kraft. We mentioned Kraft, Carvana, whoever the name is. And that in and of itself suddenly seems like, OMG, Google, or whatever name. I'm not picking on Google, right? And so is that name good for you? Like, do you just want to be proud that you sold a big name, or do you want to make sure maybe your legacy continues, maybe a family office is better? So you need to understand, again, it's an entire art that goes into selling a business, and there's a lot of preparation, but there's also psychological, and there's also legacy. Who am I selling, right? Are they assholes? Are they good people? What are other sellers? What have others? We've had that, like, you know, sometimes we sell a company to the same group, and we know, you know, we had a good experience with them, and the guys that sold before you, they had a good experience with them. But then there's groups that, you know, people don't want to sell to, because the legacy is going to get watered down, and the people are not going to be happy. So the founders need to take, you know, if they are serious about making a lot of money in the exit and making sure the legacy stays, if they care about this. Some people don't care. Some people just want the money. But, you know, a lot of people do care about what happens to my employees. And I've been hearing that, like, actually it's been a theme, you know, the founders are more worried about what's going to happen to Tara, what's going to happen to Johnny, what are they going to do, what kind of benefits are they going to get when they transfer to the new buyer. So you actually need to do your due diligence on the buyer. Just because some big name shows up at the door, if your principles need to be aligned, right? So I think that's a big one, and it will allow you to stay focused on what you want rather what they're offering. They're going to offer things, and, you know, again, it depends on your principles. If the numbers is all you care about, that's fine, and then go by the number. But if you also care about other, you know, intangibles, then do a lot of research. You need to meet a lot of people. You need to talk to people that have been there and done that, and get good counsel,
Yeah.
good advice.
Yeah. I certainly, one of the things I do with all my founders is we do a whole trade-off matrix, which is understanding, beyond numbers, like what are all the factors of the deal that we need to kind of understand your desires around, your, needs, wants, likes, and then what are you willing to trade off, right? Like, so what is a year of earnout worth for you, right? Like, regardless of what they're going to pay you, like, what is the opportunity cost there? I mean, if you've got another business that you're ready to start that could generate millions, that could be a pretty high opportunity cost. So even if they're going to, pay you X for an earnout or increase the valuation by Y to be able to do an earnout, it might not be worth it. And unless you've done the math and you've kind of thought about that, it's hard to make that decision, confidently in the moment, because oftentimes these are very in the moment discussions. So I think that whole kind of really kind of understanding what are you trying to get out of this deal is really important. The other one you mentioned, which I think is the number one thing I tell founders where the opportunity exists, is go talk to people that have sold to that company, right? Talk to other founders and find out where they are 1, 2, 3 years post transaction. How did it go, right? Because so much of this, you do these deals and everything, looks like it's going to be great. You've got these great terms. Everyone's, smiling, shaking hands, and then 6 months later, right, you've got some downturn, or you've got some challenges, headwinds in the business. And that's where, the proof comes in terms of what kind of buyer are they, what kind of partnership you've created. Neil, what's your take on this? Like, how have you kind of worked with them? Yeah.
I think the biggest thing, the hardest part on both sides, buy side and sell side, is the ability for the founder or owner to like fully remove themselves from the business in like a functional timeline that lines up with like an exit. And so like I just recently did a M&A deal with a company that I had coached for years. And the founder had done such an excellent job that it was like super even confusing to the buyers. Like they had spent like 18 months, like fully removing themselves from day-to-day operations. And the typical buyers are just so used to like, even if the owner's like, I'm out of, day-to-day operations, but I'm still the executor on the check. I still got to sign the bills or whatever it is. And his founder had done such a great job of completely removing themselves from the business. And then you get into like the more complex things that this creates, like synergies and, all these other like value uplifting things, instead of what most people are looking at, like, well, if the owner sells this business and walks away from it, they own the relationships, they own the clients, they own the, the value, they're the real delivery system for the thing. And so that, I mean, like you could have this really profitable, I've seen it multiple times, this like really profitable business, and the owner's like, this business is worth like tens of millions of dollars, but they're still like the glue that's holding together the day-to-day operations. And then the minute they walk, and anyone who's a good buyer, and to Gabriella's point, like has done deals like this before, the minute you walk away, you're still leaving 30% of the value of the, you're walking with 30% of the value.
Yeah.
You can't be mad when people want to discount the business because they have to recover from that.
Yeah. They have to factor that in. I'm curious on this walkaway, because I think this is one of the most challenging ones, and I see this again and again, founders come to me like, oh, I want to sell. And we start talking about it and they're just exhausted, right? They're like, they sell because like, I can't do this anymore, right? Like I'm burned out. I've lost my motivation, right? Like, please, like take this off my hands because I can't do it anymore. And honestly, like that's the worst situation in terms of a sales process. But what do you do? Well, yeah, well, they're not when they prepared, but they're. Yeah, I mean, I call that a distress sale, and sometimes, and unfortunately, I've been involved in a couple of situations where like life events have happened where they can't run the business anymore, for health reasons, personal reasons, and we have to sell the company, and either we're taking whatever offer we can get, or we're slicing things up into assets and trying to figure out how to liquidate as much as we can and create cash. And those are not fun. They're not great outcomes, and sometimes they're necessary outcomes, but. How do you help kind of founders create the right mindset going into this so they're not in this kind of desperate, I'm going to take whatever I can get kind of mentality either practically, but also I think just from a mindset point of view. Gabriella, what's your strategy here?
Yeah.
What's the conversation you have with founders?
Yeah. So I spend some time talking to them about where they are in life today, and I want to know, who are you? Who's in your life? How long have you been doing this? I really want to get the backstory about the narrative of their life today, and kind of try to get to the mental space. And from there, it's like, okay, well, this person, to your point, had a life event that they just need to unload this thing. So we go into the deal with a mindset of, and we know it, the buyer doesn't need to know this, but we know what the narrative and the mindset is. And my job, as an attorney, is to always honor that mindset and just advise, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? But then, if I get a 45-year-old, right, who's, young person, built an amazing asset, maybe even in a short span, I'm like, you're sitting on gold here, because you built this company in the last 7 years. You're 45. Your exit is possibly going to be X, Y, and Z, whatever the number is. And so we really talk about, it's going to be one of the most emotional times of your life, right? This is your baby, and you're going to be selling, and so there's going to be a lot of possibly comes our way on your legal, your tax, your accounting, your partnership, your cap table. There's just so much that will come. We don't even know what it is, right? And so really have the talk about, you've built this, treat it with the respect that it deserves. And I really prep them. There may be times where you want to quit and throw the towel and just give up, but I'm here. I am here. Let me carry that load, because I do this every day, kind of like the buyer does this every day. I do this every day. So don't take and so it does turn, by the end of the deal, we're best friends. Like with my clients, well, even though they're all over the country, by the end of the deal, like I've either gone to see them, or they've come to see me, or, I just told the client, we had a difficult deal, and I said, let's go to the other lawyer's office and let's meet there. Let's close the deal. And I just closed the deal, and I was telling Neil, I went to the buyer and we closed the deal in the conference room the other day. You don't do that when you want to close. You just go. You need face to face. So there's just a lot. But it's a lot of honest conversations, and in my case, it goes beyond just being the lawyer. It really goes to the human to human. What do you need? Where are you at? What load can I help you carry today? Let me carry those issues for you, because that's what you're paying me for anyway. And not get that deal fatigue, which is fatal. It can cost you a lot of money, and I don't think there's reason for deal fatigue. I've developed a process that I think removes the element of the deal fatigue. But it's a human connection that AI is never going to replace, in my view. AI was never born from another human, didn't drink the milk, didn't do the whole human experience. So it really comes down to that
connection.
It really.
Yeah, I always say I don't coach the transaction. I coach the transformation of the founder, right? And it is a transformational process, right? There's so many things happening for a founder going through that. Neil, what's your kind of take on this? How do you kind of help founders deal with the mindset and kind of get out of this kind of scarcity, risk going into a transaction?
I think we're in a really, really interesting time where, and I love the word that used the word scarcity, because I think whether you like it or not, scarcity is coming for everybody right now. And I think there's like this interesting thing that even I've been processing over the past several months is like, there was a way of doing business in the world before we had fire. Like cavemen had a way of doing business, whatever that was. And then once fire came, the way we did business changed drastically. Then there was a way of doing business before we had books. And then once printing presses started printing books, now the way we do business changed. Then there was a way of doing business when everybody rode horses. We even called it horse trading, right? Then horsepower, and now we got cars, and then the whole business world shifted. And I think we're in this like really, really interesting, weird place where like I do believe, because a lot of the clients I work with are AI companies, and you can look on LinkedIn for an hour and just see where like some of these things are headed and how fast this like transition is happening. it is about that mindset, because I would say anybody who's out there now, really has to rethink, how business was 6 months ago is not how business or valuation or structures are going to be done in like another 6 months. And I think there's something super powerful for people. We've actually now it used to be people predominantly only sold their businesses or ended their careers when they had like worked it to like the very last drop of the business, that last, like, I can't take this anymore, let's finally do this. But now you have examples in life, everything from even in the NFL, like you'd have players would play football until like they got 12 concussions, which is what entrepreneurs do sometimes.
Yeah.
And then they're like, all right, my last season at this, I'm out of here. But then you have like examples of like Michael Strahan, like winning the championship and then going on to another career, right? And all these different people like exiting companies on top. And, I think that's the biggest thing is like, it's the connection of like, why did we start this thing? Because if you started the business from a place of trauma, you're only going to be able to end it from a place of trauma.
Yeah, exactly.
And versus like you see anybody who does really, like, as silly as I think it even feels sometimes, when you have a purpose, when you're actually delivering a valuable thing, you didn't start it from a place of scarcity. Like you can go, hey, surround yourself with the right people around you who are aligned on the mission and values of what you're doing. And then you get to a place where, like, in the marketplace, this has value to it. And there's a reason why people who run great companies don't sell their companies, because they're like, and you don't hear from them online much because they're doing great things every day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that becomes an interesting thing to be like, well, if this like storm is coming, then the value, it's like the hurricane's coming, suddenly Home Depot's charging more for wood.
Mm-hmm.
That the value of the wood is suddenly more valuable because they want you to board up the windows. And after the storm hits, do you either keep on buying wood for the windows, or do you realize that your house is on the beach and you move somewhere else and sell it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I one thing I do just about every founder that I work with on this is before we talk about any kind of exit process and preparing for exit, I want to make sure they have a 3-year plan for how they're going to continue to own and operate the company that is exciting, compelling, interesting for them personally, because otherwise there's no other buyer. I always say that there's always another buyer in every transaction, which is you. Like, you keeping your company is you deciding to buy your company back from the market. And unless you've got a plan that is valuable and exciting and has future kind of possibilities, you're going to be in this scarcity mindset, right? Like, I want founders to be able to go in with a transaction saying, I'm excited to keep the company, right? Like, I've got a plan. I know what I'm going to do for the next 3 years. That's desirable. My role in it is fulfilling, right? Like, if I want to get them to that point, because then when we go to a transaction, any other buyer has to beat that, right? Like, we now have a real competitive situation, and it's not like, okay, well, I'm going to sell it or continue to be miserable, right? That's not a real choice, right? Like, you're not setting yourself up for success. And ideally, we're creating multiple potential buyers, right? We're creating a process which we're bringing multiple buyers to the table. So now I'm competing against several other people, and I might win, right? My plan might be better than anyone else out there, and that's a positive outcome, right? Like sometimes the transaction process, keeping the company is the best thing you can do, and that's fine. I'm curious for you, just a couple of points from each of you, just like other things that you'd recommend, or buyers or founders rather, who are kind of struggling with this. Like, where do you suggest that they start, or what's the question that you think they should be asking themselves to give them a little bit of a starting point on this conversation? Gabrielle, where would you start with founders?
Yeah, so I mean, I give it a little bit of a legal twist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, that's I own the GNS law, and we represent founders and business owners, families, and they want to sell their company. And so we see a lot of unnecessary crap happen during due diligence because it just things that were easy to get ready for. The reason for that is that there's a gap between the founder, not having an in-house attorney, and it's not cheap to have them, so that you don't have an attorney, your external attorney, you're calling them based on your best judgment, but you don't really have the attorney to help you get ready. right? And so, but the funny thing is, or sad or whatever, is that when the buyer looks at you, they're actually looking at your legal stuff. So if you didn't have good legal foundation, it is not just I have a lawyer. Everybody can have a lawyer. The question is, what's your lawyer doing?
Yeah.
Right. So I had a friend of mine left about $65 million dollars on the table for not having the proper legal foundation. 65 million bucks. That's a lot of money. Right. And he still took a lot, but that was 65. But that made a difference that, you're exiting at, a certain number, and then you exit at, over 100 million. And now you're, private jet, you're getting invited to really special meetings, and you have certain access that the lower tier doesn't have. So that was a big difference. And it came down to some legal issues that were pretty major. And so for that reason, what we recommended, we created a program that's called a company X-ray. And so we audit your company as a buyer. It's really tough. It's psychological, it's legal, a little bit of everything of what happens in due diligence. And then we score you and we bring you the truth, which is, hey, you're doing really well, or you have a big mess. We should fix it before the buyer sees that, which then will create that deal fatigue cycle. So that's what I recommend, is get the company X-ray and get serious about. As you can see, these are all, for all advisors in the M&A world, you have to invest money and time and emotions in getting ready. And so the X-ray is what we recommend, at least from the legal side.
Neil, how do you what's your first step with clients typically?
I champion that, what Gabriela said, and I think it's like all the pieces of it, right? Like there is so much, I've done 4 exits over the past 15 years. I've also had several businesses not exit that should have exited. And you just learn, this trial by error and a lot of these things. But I think it's like, one, the advisors around you are so important because they can unlock so many pieces of not having you learn a thing. And I mean, from building a formalized advisory board, from having strategic third parties that are outside of that circle that are going to give you a non-biased approach to it. Also, one of the things that comes up for me is knowing your numbers at the end of the day is so powerful, because and I mean the full tax thing. I've been part of so many conversations where they're doing all the multiples and your EBITDA and coming up with a valuation, and then they hadn't fully thought through their tax stuff. So if you think you're going to sell a business for 10 or 20 million dollars, but you're still going to be stuck with $2 to $5 million in capital gains, and then all these little intricacy things that I think the last time I looked at the checklist that we have 250 negotiation points, right, in the whole thing. And you go in there being you're basically dressing your child up and being putting it on the market, and then being here, my kid should be the model of Gap or whatever. And they're going to go from head to toe and be his ears are off, the jewelry's ugly, the shoelaces are the wrong color. And you as the owner have to take on every single choice that you've taken, because it's all going to be questioned. But you can really alleviate a lot of that by putting the right advisory folks in place, and they'll really be helpful. And I think what people undervalue a lot in this marketplace is, when you look at people who are repeat founders and able to move, with less resistance through this marketplace, I'd say 75% of the ability for them to do that is they're probably doing it with a proven team of people. They've worked with them before. There's trust, and they're not just figuring it out or just robbing from Peter to pay Paul every day.
The one I would add. Good.
Can I add, Neil, when you're your ears are off, you totally hit it right there, because, and I'll add one layer, which is usually when you're selling the company, let's say your buyer's paying anywhere between $5 and up, $1 million. Your buyer is likely going to bring their big team of lawyers, and these are, the big law firm lawyers. These are lawyers we negotiate on a daily basis with. But because it's a small deal for them, again, these are the lawyers for the billion-dollar companies, and they put a junior associate to deal with your $10 million deal. And, I'll talk about Brad, 28-year-old Brad downtown in the 50th floor, mid-level associate, has no freaking clue how you build your business. And Brad is the one telling you your ears are ugly and you need to, cut your hair shorter. And you're like, I've been building this business for 15 years and my business is running just fine. But Brad, 28-year-old Brad, who has no clue about running a business or whatever, is telling you what to do. So that's really frustrating, both for us, senior attorney who has built and helped people sell that. And so that is one of those things that will create, just tiny things that it's like, they'll come at you different angles. So getting those advisory boards and getting the X-ray and doing all this stuff is just so important because it will make your deal so much smoother. You have your own version of advisors like to do. So it's just a beautiful art. Just these deals are just beautiful how they happen. But just wanted to add that because that one hit.
The one that I typically add is I will often ask founders, what are they going to do after they sell? And if they don't have a pretty good answer for, what is this going to get them? Like, are they going to start another business? Are they going to focus on investing? Do they create a family office? Like, if they don't have some plan, what I find is that they will often sabotage deals, right? We can have a great deal on the table here, but if they start freaking out because they don't know what they're going to do after they sell the company, right? They'll start finding all sorts of ways to make this a deal that they don't want to take. So unless I've got a really good plan with them, I don't actually want to take them to the market yet. We're at time here, but I want to make sure we have contact information. Gabrielle, if people want to find out more information about you, what you do, what's the best way to get that?
You can visit our website, gnslawpllc.com, or you can email me at gsmith@gnslawpllc.com. And then I have the Gabby Smith, Gabby with a Y, on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn as Gabriella Smith. Would love to connect. I love to meet founders, and I'm really passionate about helping you maximize that exit because you worked really hard for it. So.
And you have a podcast too? What's the podcast?
I do have a podcast. It's called Exited Podcast, and I talk to founders who have exited, and I've talked to founders from all over the U.S., Latin America, and now we started meeting some European founders as well.
Awesome. All right, cool. And Neil, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I am all over the internet, folks. You can just search for Neil Conlon. I'm on every channel, every station, everything you can think of. I've got a book launching in the fall called Your Business is Worth More Than You Think It Is, where we break down a bunch of the valuation models and strategies. But I love talking about these topics. So please do follow, reach out, and connect. I think we're in this really interesting space of, people say this all the time, like, let's play chess, not checkers. And I think, though, in this economic environment and marketplace, there's so many great businesses that are like owner operators that are, heads down doing a great thing. And I always joke around now and say, like, if your business is creating pool noodles and you're really good at it, the business is going great, but there's a storm coming, you might want to think about your business and how you're going to sell these pool noodles when the storm comes. And that's the topic that I really like helping people with.
I love it. If people want to get a hold of me, just bruce@eckfeldt.com is email. Eckfeldt.com is my URL, my website. And I have a podcast called From Angel to Exit, where we do talk with founders about the whole kind of scaling and exiting process. And I have a book called Springboard, which is about exit planning and really the personal side for founders, helping think through post-exit vision and how it's going to drive the exit process. So feel free to check those out. Gabriella, Neil, thank you so much for taking the time today. Really appreciate you both being on. Thank you to all of our audience. Again, if you're watching the replay, leave comments and questions there. We will follow those the next coming days and weeks. And thank you everyone for joining. We'll see you on the next LinkedIn Live. Gabriella, Neil, thanks again. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great to do this with you guys.
Likewise.
Bye.